tatta dhim tatakita dhim tadim tattam.
Hello there, welcome to my channel. My name is Padma, and on this channel I share with you the practice and philosophy of body-led spiritual inquiry, which is inspired by nature and goddess-led traditions from my culture, which is India. And today I'm really looking forward to sharing with you a practice that is intriguing and mysterious, and this is the practice of the scorpion. And it came to me in these times because it seems as if this scorpion archetype is very prevalent. I've been hearing from women in my group classes and in my individual programs this constellation that they are encountering, which is very reminiscent of the scorpion archetype. And of course, for those of us who believe in astrology, we've just had very recently the very powerful lunar eclipse in Scorpio, and Scorpio's archetype is also the scorpion. The scorpion is a very ancient archetype. You can find sculptures and carvings and rock art about scorpions in artifacts ranging from ancient Egypt, and even in Gobekli Tepe, which is at 12,000 years or more old. It is supposed to be one of the oldest sites of human invocation of nature and of the divine. So what is this scorpion? A lot of people have examined the scorpion and studied the scorpion symbol, and people do say that it's very mysterious, that they're not quite sure, that it might signal something that is underground, that is secretive, and that it suddenly emerges and there is a sting in its tail. Well, that much is pretty evident. But when we go to the dance practice of the scorpion, we really find a rich and deep and multidimensional teaching that emerges. Now, I can't share the dance practice itself with you because it's a little bit too long for these kind of short practice videos, but I thought just in sharing to you some of the dimensions of this constellation, it could help you to apply that perception to the movements in your own life and to see whether it provides you with any revelations or teachings. So what is this practice of the scorpion? To put it very simply, the dance practice in the scorpion has 4 dimensions to it. One is that you go into grass that looks very green and lush and beautiful and innocent, and then you step in, and hidden in the grass is the scorpion that just stings you. Suddenly it stings you. So that is what is popularly very evident, right? So it is something that is secretive. You step in somewhere without any premonition, any intelligence or any preparedness really for something that is secretive, and usually not pleasantly secretive. So something that is underground and that emerges and that strikes you and takes you unawares. There is more to the scorpion practice. So in the next dimension of the scorpion, it is that the scorpion continues to sting multiple times. So, and the stinging is very rough, and it's not very strategic, it's not very intentioned or directed, but it's just coming almost out of a certain panic and survival instinct of the scorpion itself. So there is the fact that when you encounter these kind of situations, the stinging will just continue, not because that is the intention, but that's because that is the natural behavior of these kind of situations, that they will continue to sting. Then there is another dimension, and that is that it's becoming in that moment, in that encounter, the creeper, what is called lata in dance, the creeper, that is this sort of movement, which is that the creeper, like the scorpion, also crawls along the ground, but it's a very different constellation to the creeper. In fact, the creeper is equated to the goddess and the divine feminine. So something that is very grounded, that is also quite elusive, that is very humble, that in fact straddles energy from around it. So it's not striking out on its own and standing up and opposing something, but it is quietly creeping around, very much attached to the ground or a tree or wherever else the creeper is. And there is that bringing that intelligence, that energy, that constellation in this encounter with the scorpion. So in other words, you're not leaving the grass or running away, nor are you just staying there and being bitten, nor are you necessarily becoming the scorpion. So here there's a different kind of matching happening. It's not an imitation and it's not a mirroring, but it's a different sort of matching of energies that happens. And then the fourth dimension is that sudden expansion. In fact, the movement for that is, it's like this boom. It's a scattering and it's a fragmenting, and it's this spaciousness that just happens. So what is really important in this whole teaching of the scorpion is the non-linearity, that the encounter is multidimensional. It's not simply about you meet something and then you just simply destroy it, or you run away from it, or you fight with it, or you attack it. But it's a very non-linear movement that is suggested, a very non-linear wisdom. And the thing about this creeper practice is that it is something very intimate and very personal. It is something that's going to come from your intuition, your body-led intuition. Sometimes when we think of intuition, we are still in the mind. So this is some body-led intuition where the mind really plays no role. So none of the roadmaps of the mind, the solutions that are suggested and the roadmaps that are there are perhaps not going to help. But it's going to be something that is going to really come out of totally left field, from your body-led intuition. And that will create a spaciousness, but it's not going to be, again, a linear spaciousness. It's not going to be an expected spaciousness. And there is going to be a degree of instability and discomfort, but nevertheless, there will be a spaciousness. Let me give you an example from my own life, because sometimes when we speak about this without really putting your body in the practice, it can seem very abstract, especially as we meet it with our minds, because it's so non-linear. So here's an example from my own life, which happened to me very recently in this whole scorpion energy times. I had many years ago, several decades ago, probably about 30 years ago, I had an encounter in my life with a person who had this scorpion energy. So there I was, stepping into the green grass, thinking that I was being a mentor and I was being generous, and there was a certain naivety and perhaps a certain reluctance to look at reality on my part as well. But nevertheless, there was the scorpion encounter. And what I did is what most of us do. We kind of hang around and we think we're going to solve it with our goodness or whatever we think is our goodness. And of course, there's a lot of ego and our own knowledge, our confidence in what we know, all of this involved in that. So I continued to stay there, and of course the stinging kept happening, just like the scorpion. And I realize now, with the wisdom I have now, that it was happening because that was the nature of that encounter. So it wasn't that this person may have been thinking that they want to keep on stinging me, but that was the inevitability of that encounter. So here we are now, 30 years later, and this person resurfaced recently. And that really made me contemplate on what was going on, especially because I had this scorpion archetype really at play in the courses I was teaching, and it was really coming into my consciousness. And when I applied this lens to this encounter, which is then now, the way in which that the linearity of time dissolves in these, when you look at it through these archetypal lenses. And I realized that what the invitation was to look at the fullness of what happened 30 years ago. So to look at all the 4 dimensions of this scorpion practice and whether it had manifested. And I realized that, in fact, there was an expansion which was completely non-linear and which I hadn't really associated with this whole interplay at the time. And that is that when this particular event happened, it led me to examine my practice, to change how I practiced at the time, how I was doing my dance at the time, to change with whom I was doing it, how I was doing it, it led to really big changes in my own practice and in my work, which was actually a movement of expansion, even though it felt uncomfortable and it felt unstable and it felt rocky. But what happened was that, in fact, it actually created a spaciousness and expansion for my work. And I began to consider, and I am considering, what the message is for me again in this resurfacing of this archetype, and particularly this moment, this encounter. And I feel like the invitation for me again is to consider the dynamics of my practice at the moment, and to see where I am locking myself in, to see where is this possibility of infinity and eternity, which is of course the principles I teach in my own practice. But inevitably, the movement of the mind is always to bring us into limitations. And we think that is protection, and we think that is safety. So again, it's not that the mind is the villain, just like the scorpion is not the villain. But the inevitable movement is to bring us into certain parameters and to keep us bound. And the invitation in these encounters is to always consider where we have stopped that expansion, where we have limited that infinite possibilities, where we have limited our learning, limited our vision, limited our perception, and really limited movement, and where we are just standing in the grass and allowing the scorpion to just keep stinging us. So I do hope that this reflection will give you a way of perceiving if you are encountering the scorpion constellation in your own lives. I hope it gives you a way of considering it. It's so important to see to allow for that spaciousness, and that comes from non-linearity. If we can just step away from thinking that there is a solution-oriented or there is a answer-oriented approach to these kind of encounters, and if we can look at the multidimensionality of the encounter, where is our creeper movement, where is this movement of that sudden opening that may be happening and we may miss, as I missed what happened 30 years ago, and it's taken me all this time to actually look back and recognize what happened. But thankfully, at least now, it provides me the wisdom to actually be very attentive to the scent of infinity, because infinite possibilities is always a scent. It is very subtle, but it's very powerful in its subtlety. Thank you so much for joining me. Enjoy the scorpion movement and the teaching of this most humble and most ancient of our companions on this earth.